Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Propmodo webinar. Really excited about this one. We will be talking about multifamily strategies and what to expect in this somewhat crazy beginning end of the year. 2024 has been an interesting one so far, and lots more coming up. Obviously, we got a lot to think about. Presidential elections coming up. There is a lot of questions about interest rates and where that's all going, and obviously the state of the market is changing pretty quickly for multifamily. So we will get into all of that after I intro our panelist here. But before we do, I'd just like to take a minute to remind everyone that this is a live presentation, and we are happy to take your questions. I know a lot of you, I've seen a lot of the signups. A lot of you are experts in your own right. So if you have some questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A here, and we're happy to bring them up as they come along. We won't be saving time for questions at the end. We'll just take them right as they come. And if you have any follow-ups or anything we're talking about, please jump on and add some questions, because I know that you guys can add some really great context here. I will be adding a poll. I would love to learn a little bit more about everyone who's joining us today. So I'm going to throw a poll up here just with some basic basic questions about everybody, and where you're working, what your specialties are. So I'm going to launch this right here. As you see, the first question is really just like what your relationship with multifamily is, right? Are you an owner, developer, all of that, and what type of properties you use? I know multifamily is a pretty broad term. I think it's the one that we've adopted, but there's senior living, there's student housing, there's all of those things that I think can kind of change the direction of our conversation depending on where you guys are working. And the last question is what are the issues you're facing? I think there's probably a lot. I probably will be clicking a few of those, but I think that will help a lot to kind of help us frame the conversation in a productive way. So thanks again for joining, everyone. And without further ado, I would love to intro our experts here. Right. So first we have David Blosser. He's Director of Leasing at Veritas Investments. Hi, David. Welcome.
Hi, Franco. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Next we have Ariana Rosansky. She's VP of Multifamily Operations at JLL, joining us from Chicago, of course.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Good to see you. Yeah, thanks for joining. And last, we have Umair Ahmed. He's Regional Vice President of U.S. Sales at Defigo. That's a digital intercom and access control company. Hi, Umair.
Hey, Franco. Thanks so much for having me as well. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course, yeah. So I'd like to take some time up front on these webinars to set the stage a little bit. I know, we want to talk about some of the trends happening, and there's obviously lots of trends, right? You start slicing and dicing the multifamily market, I think you start to see that it's moving in different directions at the same time. So I'd love to just kind of hear from you guys, what you are seeing as some of your trends, and maybe give me a little bit of background, particularly of, obviously, David, Veritas is very, San Francisco heavy, California heavy, but a little bit about what you're seeing in your own market. David, why don't you go ahead and start us out? I'd love to hear. San Francisco is an interesting market right now, so here are some of the boots on the ground commentary.
It's a very interesting market, and I think in some ways we get a bad rap in the media for being this city that was one of the very first to go remote, was one of the first to go on lockdown during the COVID crisis. And with that, we saw a lot of professionals leaving the downtown area. And right now, we're looking at about a 37% office vacancy rate, which is the highest reported by our local newspaper, the San Francisco Chronicle, since the start of the pandemic. But at the same time, with the influx of new technology companies coming, specifically in AI, I've actually worked with applicants at OpenAI and Anthropic, which are two burgeoning companies here in the city. I feel confident that this vacancy rate in our offices will change. I see an influx of people coming back, especially millennials. That's our primary demographic, people in their late 20s to late 30s who are very eager to live in the city, primarily working in the South Bay, but want the exciting city lifestyle. But just to give you some data that I'm seeing in market surveys that also reflects what I see in the field on the day-to-day, apartment rents are 84% higher in San Francisco than the national average. I think we all understand that. It's still a very expensive city to live in. But with Veritas Investments, I work as the director of leasing for a 246 property portfolio. These buildings range from as small as 4 units to 110 units and everything in between. So really, we represent smaller to mid-size multifamily real estate operators. Right now, San Francisco's rent growth has decreased 1.5% year over year. However, since the start of June, so just last month, rents are actually increasing by 0.4%. So there are positive trends happening. Demand is increasing. Of course, right now we're at the height of the summer season. People are eager to make the most of these rent concessions and promotions that are happening everywhere from 1 to 2 months free. So we're feeling really eager despite what we're seeing in market surveys at the moment.
Yeah, and there's this interesting connection between office and the multifamily, right? Particularly if you're looking at a city center, somewhere the financial district. But talk to me about how maybe that isn't, always the case in San Francisco. I'm guessing there's some people that live there that still live there, even though they are working remote, right? People live there because they want to, not necessarily because they have to.
Absolutely. That's a good question. And I think it varies depending on the type of operator we're working with. For us at Veritas, we deal primarily with rent-controlled assets, meaning our buildings were built prior to 1979, and they are regulated by the rent ordinance. So this year, the maximum rate at which we can increase a unit is 1.7%. So with that, we have individuals who have lived in their units since 1935. I am also a resident manager at one of our properties where I have a resident who's been here for 63 years. And with that, they pay a small percentage from what we might see today's market standards, of course. In the financial district in San Francisco, that's the neighborhood that has struggled the most since the pandemic. There's primarily new construction in this neighborhood. And what we've seen is that as individuals come back to the city, or those who are just simply relocating within, they want to live in these neighborhoods that have rent-controlled properties, where they can have a very classic San Francisco experience. They don't want to live in a high rise. They want to live in an Edwardian or Victorian home in Alamo Square. They want to live in a small 4-unit building in the heart of the Castro. So even though the downtown area has struggled, and we do have buildings in surrounding neighborhoods, typically what we do is we increase the promotion to drive more traffic within those specific neighborhoods. But otherwise, prospects are really eager to start touring, and we haven't had a lot of difficulty bringing people into these surrounding neighborhoods.
Interesting. Yeah, sometimes it's an education thing because people just probably don't even know where to look, right? If they're from out of the area or relocating.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Ariana, I'd love to hear from you about what you're seeing with your market. And you're primarily in Chicago, or are you dealing with properties all over the country?
So we have properties. So JLL manages Class A high rises and mixed use assets, primarily in Chicago, but also in South Florida, Denver, and then we are continuing to expand our national footprint. So, right now, I mean, we are really enjoying a very decent demand experience, especially here in Chicago. But I think what's really interesting is Chicago is a very neighborhood, focus. As you go from neighborhood to neighborhood, you're going to find, different opportunities for different buildings and different lifestyles. But what we're finding and sort of what I'm seeing sort of this trend shift is renters, maybe 10, 15 years ago, were very focused on a neighborhood. They were only specifically looking for, Lakeview, Lincoln Park. Now we're seeing renters that are very neighborhood agnostic, and they're really looking for a building and a unit that really fits their lifestyle. And will add to or enhance their lifestyle in the city. And so there's not as much of a sort of neighborhood loyalty so much as what the building or unit offers them in their day-to-day. And that's been a really interesting trend that we're seeing in Chicago specifically.
Yeah, I know you guys only deal with Class A, you said, which is interesting because it looks like the majority of the people on this webinar are also, dealing with that as well. But, do you think Class A is harder or easier right now to rent up than maybe some of the kind of lower grade?
I think it's all really about a lot of it is the technologies, right, and how we use them. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to that human element and really that service component. And a person who rents in a Class A building, paying $4,000 or $5,000 a month, that same money is the same to a person who's maybe looking in a Class B or a Class C asset. So it really comes down to how the management team and the on-site teams there are really making that experience for the resident or the prospect. It's super important that, whatever we put out in our marketing, whatever we put out in our messaging and our brand, is followed through from the minute that somebody, wants to tour, comes in, takes the tour, rents, and then moves in. And that human element really needs to be present from beginning to end throughout their entire experience. And I think from Class A, Class B, C, D, that human element has to come through in any asset class that you're working in. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And I've been so impressed by some of the kind of, more affordable classes, right? Attainable classes, how they have really taken a page from the Class A of having events and programming. And I mean, even like, rent controlled affordable, right? Can still have that kind of really, really awesome, like you call it, the human element. And it sounds like that does really move the needle, right? That is something that, people might overlook, that they don't want to live on this street or that street, or they would rather live here because they are getting this kind of elevated service. They are getting more than just the kind of four walls that surround you. So that's super fascinating. Mary, I know you deal with a lot of clients, right? And so I think you have a really good kind of bird's eye view of how everyone is doing right now. What's your thoughts on the state of the market, and kind of maybe cut it up in a couple different pieces of regional and by class?
Absolutely. So, Defigo is a prop tech company, and our view in the market is largely informed by our customer demand from the different markets. And we serve both multifamily and commercial, but what's been interesting is there's been far more demand for our products and solutions on multifamily than commercial. I think commercial is still, compared to multifamily, struggling in some areas. When I talk to owner operators, developers every day, the overall consensus seems to be very optimistic. Demand has been fairly resilient across the country. So despite economic fluctuations, uncertainty around interest rates, demand for multifamily housing remains strong. And this is largely being driven by urbanization, shifts in demographics. And, I saw one comment around affordability, renting being a cheaper option. So affordability is really, really key. Occupancy rates are really interesting because they've been averaging around 96%, though I think some regions do face higher vacancies due to new supply. And rent growth overall has moderated from the pandemic highs, but remains fairly positive. New supply is very interesting because I think what I was reading is that 2024 is projected to see the highest level of new apartment completions since the Nixon era. We're talking like roughly over 670,000 new units, which will definitely ease some of those supply constraints. When it comes to regions, I talk to owner operators from across the country, even into Canada, and where I think we're seeing the most interesting demand coming from is in the Sun Belt states. So I think there's continued migration in states like Texas, Florida, Arizona, that is really boosting demand, and that's largely due to favorable economic conditions. In some cases, no state income tax, increased job opportunities from companies relocating their headquarters to cities like Austin or Dallas. But I think that's not necessarily a bad thing for urban centers like New York or San Francisco or Chicago, because they are also seeing a recovery in demand post-pandemic. And that's largely driven by the fact that many people that moved out of cities are now wanting to move back because their offices or work has demanded that they return to office, or they miss that city life where they're able to connect with friends and family. And then I think third, which is really interesting, is the emergence of secondary markets. So you have cities like Nashville or Boise or Raleigh that offer really great investment opportunities for investors and folks looking to maybe purchase their first home. And again, this is largely driven due to lower costs and higher growth rates. From a class perspective, I think luxury apartments with high-end amenities, something that Ariana alluded to earlier, continue to perform well in more affluent areas. They have modern amenities, the latest tech. There's definitely a decent amount of demand in that area. And then when it comes to Class B properties, more affordable units are high in demand because of rising costs among the working class families and young professionals.
Yeah, and I'd like to, some interesting points have been brought up here in the chat, and I'd like to bring them out. So one is obviously what you talked about, Amir, is that there is a lot of inventory coming on the market, right? More than ever. But I think it is a little bit of a misnomer because it's not coming on in every city equally, right? It's not like San Francisco is still very, very underbuilt and probably will always be, right? Because it's just so hard to build there. Whereas like someone noted, like Austin, they're starting to see rent, kind of come the other way, right? Rents dropping. What is interesting to me is that a lot of these cities, Sunbelt cities in particular, are the ones that got the most investment, right? Had cap rates that were like minuscule during the pandemic. Everybody thought this was, because of the migrations and everything. So what's, maybe give me an idea of what you guys think is going to happen to some of these markets. Like, are we going to see enough building in some markets to really affect the demand for apartments? I mean, maybe Ariana, you can give me an idea of what you're kind of seeing. Obviously, Denver, I would call one of those cities that's starting to get a lot of building in Florida, like you said too. But what's your take? Do you think that are we building enough to really affect the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you pointed out Denver, so I'll start there. Denver has, I would say, seen a huge increase in supply over the last 2 years, specifically in the downtown and Rhino submarkets. And what we're seeing is there's a softening in that market. There's a lot of demand. There are still people that are moving for jobs. A lot of that population is very transient, so they come in for 2 to 3 years, they stay, and then they move on. But there's still a lot of people that want to live there. Climate has a lot to do with that. It is the Sunshine State for a reason, I think, truthfully, more so than Florida. But there's a lot of, upside to living there. But we are seeing concessions, sort of rent wars. There are buildings that are undergoing renovations to kind of keep up with a lot of that supply. But you go to South Florida and there's a lot of building going on and there's really no sort of rent ceiling in sight. And, I've spoken to quite a few leasing and management professionals down there, just sort of, continue to understand and expand on that market knowledge. And, they are just kind of continuing to raise rents and sort of seeing how far they can go. Mm-hmm. And that's a very interesting trend to see here in Chicago. We are, come 2025, we are seeing a decrease in the new supply in the market. But we still have a lot of, demand for apartments. I think, multifamily in general, everyone is always going to need a place to live. And so I think that's going to be something that we continue to watch and certainly monitor as we, move through these next couple of years.
Yeah, what's fascinating to me is I think, if you zoom way in, the supply and demand, okay, more supply will bring the prices down, right? And so that I think could pose a threat to a lot of multifamily markets. But I think sometimes if you take a bigger picture, it can actually maybe benefit it. And I'm thinking particularly of places like, like the Central Loop in Chicago, mm-hmm. right? Like we have someone talking about, office to residential conversions. I know that those are, getting pushed very heavily in Chicago right now. And I would argue that adding more units to a financial district that is kind of dead probably would help it out, right? In a lot of ways, I think maybe that is a missing piece of some of these financial districts that could maybe help it in the long run, right? And so, I mean, what do you guys think? Is there opportunity that is also being created by these kind of record number of new units being put on? Amir, I'm interested in yours because you have a really good, a wide view. Like I say, it's different in every city, right? Where I can see where David might not be thinking much about this, but people in, you know, Denver and
Yeah.
Nashville and all of these places probably are, right? Do you think that there is some opportunity too here, or is it all kind of a negative trend for prices?
No, I wouldn't say it's a negative trend. Look, I think, natural law of economics, if you increase supply, overall prices will drop. And I think that's really good to attract, new folks into your city, into your financial centers. I spend a lot of time in New York. And what's really interesting about New York is that obviously there's not a lot of land available to build new assets. So there's obviously the trend with office to resi conversions. There are thoughts about building on top of other existing infrastructure assets. And while that will definitely help kind of ease that supply shortage, the other factors to consider are just overall cost of living. So New York, cities like Chicago tend to be far more expensive than cities like Denver or Austin, for example. So there's a lot of consideration that goes into, choosing where to live. I think, of course, if you have an office that you have to go to 5 days a week, you're going to make it work. But with folks and families that have more flexibility, they're going to be looking at different factors. So I think, urban areas will naturally offer more convenience and amenities, but at higher costs, whereas suburban areas provide more space, affordability that appeals to family and remote workers. Another factor is just, being transit oriented. So there is a benefit that naturally big cities have, where you're probably located pretty close proximity to public transportation, which also remains a key factor for many tenants. So I think, really, it comes down to owner operators being a bit more creative than simply trying to reduce rent. It's about how can you modernize your assets, offer convenience, security, simplicity, just a better lifestyle. I know that's something that we just discussed earlier, that suits, the evolving needs of the modern day tenant. That I think is far more important in the longer run.
Yeah. What about you, Ariana? Mentioned it. Do you see opportunity in some of these neighborhoods where they're just trying to put as many units as they can in some of these empty office buildings? Or do you think that's only a negative as far as rent?
No, I wouldn't say negative. I think that, an office to resi conversion is incredibly complex. So you need to have a very, very well thought out plan, and capital backing to be able to do it, because it is complicated. A lot of office systems aren't necessarily built for residential. You have to think about building layouts, floor plans, how that all affects it. And so I don't think it's negative, but it's a very complex kind of project that I think, needs to be very, very detailed in how you plan it and execute it.
Yeah. I know that some of those projects someone here says they've done it, pretty cheaply, but I think they can run over budget if you're not careful, for sure. So, all right, well, let's get into some of the strategies, right? So we've kind of outlined what's happened in the market, but what have you guys seen work? And I want to start at the very beginning, right? When you're planning out your leasing strategy, oftentimes it starts with kind of understanding your target, right? Who they are, where you can reach them. I would love to hear, and maybe let's start with you, David, about you. I think you guys have a very defined target, right, of who you want. So talk to me about how you think about them, right, and maybe how that influences your decisions about the leasing and everything else.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tie this into our previous conversation, because as we think about office spaces, there's a lot of controversy in San Francisco with creating maybe new construction out of it, which, as I've said, the financial district is already a very challenging neighborhood to rent in. A lot of people don't want to live there. There have been talks about UC campuses starting classes in some of these buildings, and maybe some of these buildings being repurposed into affordable housing to help, address the homeless issues we're experiencing in the city and substance abuse issues. But with that, at Veritas, we operate within a vertically integrated platform, and that's really crucial to our strategy. That essentially means that we take direct ownership of all of our stages of production. So we do our own asset management, we do our own property management, our own maintenance, our own marketing, and our own leasing. All of this is done within house. And what's really incredible about this platform and about this system of organization is that we've built technology that works best for us. It's powered by Salesforce, but it's really controlled by our people. And just to give you an understanding of the life cycle, we call it the turn life cycle. It starts with when a resident moves out of their unit. That unit goes through our system to our property services team, who decides, are we going to convert this unit to increase the ROI? Are we going to just do a light paint and clean because maybe we don't have the budget at the moment? Are we going to do a heavy remodel, etc.? Then the unit goes to our asset management department, who prices the unit accordingly. Then it goes over to marketing, who creates all of our ads from our website, where we see over 40,000 visitors per month. It's the leading apartment website in the San Francisco Bay Area for rentals. And then also that feeds into all the ILS channels, from Zillow to Apartment List, Zumper, HotPads, all of these major websites that our target audience, millennials, are looking at on the day-to-day. What I love, and where I come into play with my team, I oversee our leasing agents, they all have it on their cell phones. So when they're out in the field touring apartments, they can plug in all of their prospects' criteria. Are they looking for an 800 square foot, 1-bedroom in Pacific Heights or the Marina, with in-unit laundry, with parking availability? They can plug that in, but at the same time, my agents can also put it within an X mile radius. So if they're ready to cross-sell, they can go down the street to our other property to show them another unit that meets their criteria, or maybe it's slightly different, and that agent opens their prospect's eyes to something they didn't previously consider. So with that, just to tie it into our previous conversation, there is, despite what people think, a lot of rental demand in San Francisco. And we don't have the ability to go and create new construction, new developments in these older rent-controlled neighborhoods, because there are city rules and regulations that prevent us from doing so. So what we've done is built what are called accessory dwelling units. These are apartments that are primarily in basements or garages that have been repurposed. And with them, they're fully remodeled with in-unit laundry, which, believe it or not, is still a hot commodity in San Francisco, because a lot of our units have them, but many other rent-controlled assets do not. They don't even have dishwashers. So by repurposing garage spaces and basements, etc., we're able to increase the fair market value of the building, and in turn, of course, please our investors, who are investing a lot of capital in these properties.
Interesting. Ariana, I want to hear from you a little bit about how you guys think about, obviously, your Class A, but yeah, how you think about the market. And I'm going to add a little rider in here because I see it in the chat. You know, how do you think about kind of giving people the option to work from home, right? Are you building units specifically for that, or is that just something that, you know, hopefully someone can figure out a way to put their laptop somewhere?
Yeah. So I'll kind of take a step back in the process, because, you know, I think, you know, obviously leasing and marketing is super important, but where we really start our process is when we're working with developers and owners on building plans, right? Because from the beginning, you want to always have an idea of who you're building for, what your target demographic is, who are they, and really try to understand from there how you're going to build units in a building that's really going to not only help with their life story when they move into the building, but also their life story as they sort of grow up in the building, so to speak, right? So you know, maybe a Gen Z person comes in as a single person, they're on their second or third job, they move into a studio. We want to offer, you know, other opportunities for them to sort of grow up in the building. And so all of that happens before the building is even built. And so we really work closely with the developers and owners to really understand what that approach is, what their strategy is, what the business plan is for the asset. And then understand from there, what are the features that are worth spending money on. Closet organizers, as you mentioned, Franco, like a lot of people working from home, outlets are really important. Outlets where people can plug in their living room or their den, or, you know, in their kitchen as they're cooking dinner. I mean, a lot of those sort of small details really are very impactful, not only in the unit itself and how it's used, but also in the rent that you can get for the apartment. You know, closet organizers are a very popular asset Does it get you a premium in the rent? Maybe not, but does it get you somebody who's going to come in and notice that and remember that before they move on to the next building? Absolutely. We're looking at, double vanities in some of our larger 1-beds or 1-bedroom dens now, because people are coming in with, as a couple, maybe they're not renting a 2-bedroom today, but they're moving in and they want, additional space. It's sort of being really thoughtful about where we can spend the money, where developers and owners maybe can, save a few dollars, but also where the money is best spent. So we start there in sort of that building phase. And we are taking, into consideration the work from home spaces, having enough or a larger, living room space, because assuming that, someone's going to want to take a couple conference calls from their couch, that's absolutely something that people do. I think also it sort of, we look a lot at the amenity spaces, right? How we are sort of utilizing those spaces, but making them multi-purpose. Before COVID, maybe there were 1 or 2 sort of individual office spaces that were a part of a larger, common area in the building. Now, in a lot of the buildings that we're a part of, that we're managing, that are delivering today, there's 9 or 10 where people can go in. They have, their own space, but they can open the door and still feel like they're part of that, community and that activity going on. We have demo kitchens that also serve as maybe a demo kitchen at night, but a meeting space during the day. So it's sort of utilizing all these spaces that are multi-purpose. And then on the, resident retention side, it's activating those spaces and how we are sort of making this community feel like a neighborhood where residents can come in, use the space, pack up their laptops and their stuff at 5 o'clock, and it turns into something else, at 6 or 7, where they can actually start to build that community and those relationships with their neighbors.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up amenities, because that's, obviously a huge question. If you're building a building, remodeling, owning a building, right, I think a lot of money has been wasted in history on amenities that probably don't get used all that much. But I think, what you were just telling me is that sometimes it's not about necessarily that amenity itself, right? You maybe don't have to spend on weights and a golf simulator and all of these things, but just having the space and then having the human element of someone that's going to activate it could be enough, right? To provide a really useful amenity. Mary, I know that you, obviously help provide a lot of data, for companies. I think good multifamily operators are always looking at what's being used, what's your utilization rate. Talking about some of the nuances there, right? Because I think the gym is a great one, right? Most people don't use it, but most people think they're going to use it when they lease up, right? So how do you think some of your clients are taking that data of what's being used and crafting an amenity strategy with it?
Yeah, so I think we're going through, especially in the tech space, prop tech space, a golden era when it comes to data. There's a plethora of data available for multifamily owner operators at all levels. There are products like sensors that can detect occupancy, to really measuring the efficiencies of your HVAC systems. In particular, what we do with Defigo is really focusing on access control and building security. And to date, it's been really an afterthought. We've had traditional intercom systems that have those clunky buttons. There's no virtual or digital interface. And because of the digitization of a lot of these amenities, be it access control or something else, you're now able to really tap into the data and make sense of it. Now, the reality is not every property management team is well equipped to really understand and make sense of that data and understand how to apply those insights into their day-to-day practices. So a lot of what we do is really look into our systems and then act as consultants. It's not just like, hey, here's a cool product, sign up, here's your monthly bill. We really want to enable the success. So when it comes to property management, it's really us trying to quantify the effect that it has on NOI. So overall, when you adopt a system like Defigo or any other property management system or a smart lock, or as I mentioned, HVAC system, really what you're trying to understand is that how can it elevate my resident experience? So how can it offer tenants more convenience, simplicity, ease of use? Second, how can it really help the property management team increase operational efficiencies, thereby reducing the administrative burden on managing some of the the nuances when it comes to tech. That in effect frees up time for them to focus on activities that actually drive NOI. So we're really focused on that. We're actually trying to figure out how we can actually quantify it and make it a bit more tangible. But a lot of our customers directly tell us that that reduction in administrative burden, increase in free time, helps them deliver just that. And then there's the aspect of just being able to really understand how to make spaces a bit more secure. I think some cities are definitely experiencing that challenge with increased break-ins or squatters, for instance. So as technology providers, this is where we step up, really truly understand problems, combine data and just anecdotal experience to figure out what solutions solve what problems. So I think the key takeaway here is that data in itself is only valuable if you know how to make sense of it. It's that old saying, garbage in, garbage out, and it really comes down to working with the right partners, both in the technology side and the operations side, to really understand how we can make the best of the data that we have available to us.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear from you, Amer, just about, there's so many apps, right? Like that's the new thing. It's like a very easy thing to turn on. You can have a building app and you can do all these fun stuff. But from what I have heard, oftentimes they maybe don't get adopted as much as people would like, right? There's, but where is access control kind of the gateway into the apps, right? Do you think, I mean, that's something we all need, right? Everybody needs to get in. Everybody loves the fact that, you don't have to have your key. Like, do you think that's kind of the first pathway into having a resident who is accustomed to bring, first thing they grab for is their cell phone, and that's how they can interact with the building?
It's a really great question, and it's super interesting you bring that up, because those are some of the conversations we've been having both with customers and internally when we have our product briefings. These apps have been around, tenant experience apps, if you will call them, have been around a while. I myself used to be a part of a company that built them for major multifamily owner operators across the country, and while they're really great in kind of aggregating a lot of the different solutions and amenities available within a built environment, there's always that challenge of adoption. I think that's with any tool. We're lucky in the sense that we're in the access control space, so really there's no choice but to interface or interact with the technology, because then you're not going to get into the building. Your visitors won't be able to get in. Your electrician wouldn't be able to get in, and it's something you have to do, take seriously. So at Defigo, we do have an app. It's a mobile app that tenants, residents have in their pocket. It's used to essentially open the door. It's also a communication device. They can receive video calls directly to their phone remotely anywhere and see who's calling them and let them in with a simple tap of a button. And then property managers, on the other hand, also have a tool which is cloud-based, where they can understand who has access to what entry points, revoke access, tenant onboarding, offboarding, etc. So naturally, an extension to that would be to really understand how that same app or that same utility can be extended beyond access control. So now it's about booking shared spaces like a gym or a conference room, or being able to host events in the main lobby and create a community-oriented environment. So in a world where right now there's a bit of app fatigue, perhaps, like both on the tenant side, but even the property management side, there's so many tools out there. What do we use? What don't we use? How do we keep costs low? I think the winners are going to come out as top as the ones that can really aggregate a lot of those functionalities and be that one-stop shop. So we're thinking deeply about that. That comes through integrations. We don't want to do it all ourselves. I think if we do too many things, it's a saying goes, if you have too many priorities, you have no priorities. And we really want to get access control right, building security right. But the way we kind of elevate that, take it to the next level, is working with both technology partners and then multifamily owner operators to really solve those key challenges.
Yeah, and obviously there's, they go hand in hand, right? If you have a booking system and you book a space, then the access control's got to let you in, right?
Exactly.
It's all got to jive together. Interesting question just came up here. I'd love to pose to you, Amer, which is there pushback for needing a phone, for access? I'm thinking about David's example of the person who's, lived in the property for 60 years, right? Maybe they're not tech savvy, right? Like, how do you get around that kind of, people who just want to keep things the same?
It's a very good question. So I'll step back and talk a little bit about trends again. So we have two cohorts, right? You have younger generations that are delaying homeownership due to high costs. They're more inclined to rent. So there's a demand from millennials and Gen Z for multifamily housing. But at the same time, you have baby boomers that are downsizing from single family homes into multifamily living arrangements. Why? Because they don't want to worry about maintenance. They don't want to shovel the snow in the winter. They don't want to rake leaves in the fall. And they want community. So multifamily environments are obviously more conducive to community living. So as a technology company, we think really deeply about universal design. Access control is one of those things that has to work for everybody. It can't just work for those that are tech savvy or tech literate or have a smartphone. So while we have built an app, it doesn't mean we can exclude people that don't want to use one or can't. So that means, incorporating some elements of legacy technology. So with Defigo, you can actually call someone on their landline and have them press 5 to unlock their door. It will work the traditional way. We also partnered with the city of Oslo. So for context, very quickly, Defigo is a Norwegian company. We partnered with the city of Oslo to build a first of its kind answering communication device for the elderly. So it's basically sits in their home, wherever they want. It's not plugged into a wall, it connects over the internet. And the interface, the user experience is designed with big lettering, big fonts, to make it accessible and easy to use. And then on that line, we also work, in some respects with affordable housing, where you have tenants with accessibility needs and different requirements. So really working with owner operators to understand who their demographic is, what problems are they looking to solve, and it really being up to us to design products that work for all. And that's really in our ethos as a company.
David, what's your guys' stance on these technologies? You're an interesting company because you don't have any giant buildings, right? That's usually the use case. We have this giant building, we can roll out an app and everybody's on it. You have smaller buildings, but a portfolio of them in a small area, right? So does that allow you to turn on some of these amenities and technologies that are usually kind of kept to larger buildings?
It does. And even though we are a small to mid-sized building operator, I think our technology is really impressive for companies of our size and stance. For example, through our Drive platform that I was talking about previously, that's not just something internal that we in the leasing department, maintenance department, property management departments use. Our residents have access. And for example, if we have a tenant living at, in a unit that was built likely in 1920, that's when most of our buildings were constructed, and there are specific units or issues with the plumbing in this unit. Through that Drive platform, when this resident is submitting a work order that goes to our maintenance team, they have an understanding of what are the recurring problems and themes in this unit. They'll send out a technician that has expertise in this specific area, whether they're a plumber, an electrician, etc. And then this tenant likely is building a relationship with this technician that is in-house, because again, all of our operations are done internally. We don't hire outsourced contractors unless absolutely necessary if we're dealing with a very nuanced and niche issue. But throughout this, the resident is building a relationship with this technician. That information is recorded in our Drive system, and we're able to send the technician back to this tenant's unit if they have issues in the future. So that's just one example of how technology really helps enhance our resident experience, and we consistently get positive feedback. Even our tenants, we repeatedly send out communications to our older residents to ensure that they understand exactly how to do this. It doesn't have to just be done through their phone. It can be done on their computer. And then of course, we also give them the option to call in if they prefer to just do it directly over the phone. So we try to be open to legacy ways of being and doing, but also opening up to newer technologies that's all enabled through our Drive system.
Yeah, it's very well thought out. I hadn't thought about that, but that's true. If you get the same technician back in that you've already used, like just a little thing like that can ingratiate someone to a property that could, retain them and get the good reviews.
Absolutely. And it's done with
question.
Sorry, Franco. Yes, and just very quickly, in terms of leasing, since that's what we're focusing on, that's also what we do through Drive. When a prospect comes back through our system inquiring about a specific unit, it gets sent back to that leasing agent so they understand, is their criteria the same, or maybe it's changed? They're no longer looking for a 1 bedroom in the Mission, they're looking at a 2 bedroom in North Beach now because they have a roommate who's joining them. So all of this information gets housed in our technology, sent to the leasing agent so that they can continue to cultivate this relationship with their prospect.
Yeah, amazing how much data just never got recorded, right? In the old processes, that would just be on some notebook somewhere, and it would have just
Excel
been gone. Right?
spreadsheet.
And new leasing agent, they had no idea. Yeah, that's so much data that I think people probably haven't even harnessed half of it yet. What we could. I got a
Absolutely.
question here, particularly for Ariana. I'd love to throw this one at you. So, someone was asking, what other examples of small like unit improvements or amenities that you notice making a difference for prospects, right? You talked about organizers,
Yeah.
outlets, but what else do you kind of have really seen fundamentally move the needle?
I'm going to say storage. Any opportunity for storage, and it can be one of the best examples I have recently is we have a building with convertible units, and the developer put in a built out just a small sort of almost cubby in the wall where it's a table, and then there's drawers or cabinets under it, and you can put basically your keys, you can put your bag down. It's enough space that you can actually put things on top and then also store things in the bottom. And it's a cubby in a wall, and it was not expected. And walking in, it's a huge selling point. It's one of actually the better leasing floor plans that we have at that building. And a lot of it is due to just really finding opportunity and ways in smaller units to sort of build out those spaces. A lot of vanities today, bathroom vanities, just have the open cabinets. If you can devise ways to, maybe if there's a double vanity in the middle, you put 3 or 4 drawers. That's being really thoughtful. It's obviously understanding who's going to live in those spaces, but also creating opportunities for them to have both cabinets and drawers. Seems very simple, but any opportunity that you can to kind of have that is a huge success in units.
Mm-hmm. And units have been shrinking too, right? So there kind of is more of a need to be really thoughtful about where storage goes. David, I know that lots of bikes and stuff in San Francisco. Like, how do you guys deal with storage in some of these older buildings that just might not have it?
Absolutely. And from a unit perspective, it's also very interesting. And what I love being in a smaller company like Veritas is that we work very closely with our property services team. Us agents, when we're in our drive system, we often record our prospects' feedback on the spot so that it gets sent to the respective departments. So just to give you an example, before the pandemic, our property services team was working on a lot of units that didn't have a lot of office or den spaces or even rooms for bikes. But now, after the pandemic and after collating agent and prospect feedback, units are now being designed very thoughtfully by our property services team, focusing on adding more offices because people do work from home, and then also adding more storage spaces within the building to accommodate bikes, and specifically e-bikes, which, to be honest, you need in San Francisco unless you have amazing calves and you're super athletic and you can get up these hills. So it's something property services is constantly thinking about, how to make the most out of the spaces we have. Again, we don't really have the luxury of building something new from the ground up. So we have to be very thoughtful and creative with what we have. And bike storage is huge. Laundry rooms are huge. And even adding laundry within the units, like I said before.
Umair, how do you guys think about storage? Because sometimes it does kind of its own little world, right? It's outside the unit. It's another area, right? There's a bike storage room. I mean, those need to be secured just like the house. So, how do you kind of design your technology to have these kind of second spaces in mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Like super important. You don't want your stuff getting stolen.
Yeah.
And that when you have storage rooms, when you have package delivery rooms, it in effect increases the burden on the property management staff.
Mhm.
More surveillance, more making rounds, making sure things are running smoothly. So how can technology help alleviate some of that administrative burden, give residents, tenants that peace of mind? Our initial focus was largely on the entry point, being a digital intercom service. But since then, we really extended our solutions to other shared spaces and amenities. So the way we've done that is through smart RFID integration technology. So with Defigo, you can actually have smart RFID readers placed in front of the door of a package room or a storage locker, and the resident or the tenant would be able to use the exact same app that they use for the intercom at the front door to be able to open that door as well. And then that gets logged. So as a property manager or as a building security manager, you'll have real-time access to who accessed what. Was it through an app? Was it through a key fob? Was it through a smart access card? And then there's also that component of integrating with other platforms that specialize, say, in video surveillance. So if there was an incident, for instance, you'll be able to use Defigo's cameras in the future to be able to say, be able to actually get a log of that activity.
Mhm.
One of the more interesting trends that we're actually seeing from a demand perspective is actually what I was referring to earlier, which is the package room and delivery component. So we all order things from Amazon or through online shopping, and that is almost constant. So I used to live in a condo in downtown Toronto, and it was almost every other hour there was someone coming to deliver a package. That can be really stressful for a concierge who can't just sit there all day, accepting
You
packages.
might have the
So there needs
room.
to be
Yeah.
exactly right. There's other things they need to do. So there needs to be a way to automate that experience without compromising security. So one of the things that we're investing in and really focusing on is how we can automate that experience end to end, whether that's through a QR code or PIN that the delivery person has. They're able to drop off a package. The tenant gets a notification on their phone that their package has arrived. They then go and type in a PIN to open the package room. They pick up their package, and there's now a log that says, "Okay, package has been picked up." So it's things like that where you have spaces, be it a gym, locker room, package delivery room, that again do need to be secured, but also in a way automated when it comes to access control. That being a really key convenience feature to offer tenants, but also really important for building security as a whole.
Mhm. Ariana, do
I'm
you guys
excited to
go on, David?
just very quickly, Umair, because that is such a great comment. I'm really excited to say that at Veritas, we do already have this, and all of our
Amazing.
buildings have intercom call, but I have to throw it out there. We have intercom call boxes outside of all of our buildings. The tenants are directly programmed into it. So when a deliverer arrives, that tenant is notified on their phone that their package has been delivered in the mailroom, that it's been delivered in the Amazon hub locker. We have those across our properties as well. So they do get a notification, and it has been such a great thing, even for our older tenants who, as we said before, who are not as adept with technology. Package security, that's an issue we're all facing in San Francisco and major metropolitan areas. So any chance to automate this, I think, is really crucial.
Mhm. I
Sorry,
know for a
Ariana.
while
That's okay.
there was the hope that there would be in-unit delivery, right? And
Yeah.
latch had integration with USPS, and that was kind of the big thing. Maybe the concierge could come in and out. Have you guys seen that, Ariana? You guys have nice Class A buildings. Do any of those have in-unit delivery capability?
We have not rolled that out yet. I think, still security and liability are, top concerns. Not everybody necessarily wants that service. I think part of it is, certainly the human element and that customer service aspect of it, which, we have 24/7 door teams at all of our properties that, assist residents. Also, our property managers, because we're utilizing technology, have an opportunity to actually step out from behind their desks and assist residents. But in terms of, sort of going that and doing the in-home, we have not implemented or rolled that out at this point.
Yeah, it's funny. It seems to be not a technical issue, right? We can do it. It's just a cultural thing, right? Do people really want, the UPS guy, and you're the Amazon delivery guy opening your fridge and putting,
Correct, because it's not always the same person. Although,
Yeah.
we try to have our, our team, and we get to know our regular delivery people, but that's not always the case. And, I think with, just some of the demographic just is not fully comfortable with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see
Yeah.
maybe, 10, 20 years down the road, people being more comfortable with it. But for now, seems to be one of those things that there's, a lot of talk, but I haven't seen it rolled out in mass like we thought. I got time for one more question here. Is an interesting one. Obviously mortgage rates are up, a lot harder to own a house. Are you seeing any demographic shifts? Ages, people like that are a little older that normally maybe would have been homeowners, maybe families coming to rent or higher income people coming to rent. And if so, how are you adjusting for that? Ariana, why don't we stay with you on this one?
I mean, I think, we are still, we still think about, and we still, certainly include in all of our strategies and sort of thought processes that Gen Xer or the family. The Gen Xer is still, we see a renter by choice, whether it is a second smaller home for them or they are choosing to give up their home and move somewhere else because renting is just a lot easier from a maintenance perspective and just a monthly bills perspective. We do, see families who, move into our communities. Typically, they are staying for a year or two, either as they build, model, or look for a home. So they are a little bit more transitional. But in terms of, just how we cater to them, I think it's really, again, sort of thinking back to how we are building and activating our properties and how we are including, our renters in sort of all of our marketing and activation amenity spaces. Most of our buildings have pools. That's a really great opportunity for just, a general, a pool party in the summer, ice cream, DJ. I mean, you can sort of build these and activate these spaces and have these events that cater to all different ages and everyone can make their own time from it. A lot of our families and Gen Xers and millennials are pet owners, so we certainly cater to them in terms of our pet events and community events that we do around our dogs and our furry friends. So there's different ways to do it, and I think that you don't necessarily have to call out a different demographic, but you can, certainly include them in a lot of the, marketing pieces and things that you do, because again, they're choosing that building because it fits their lifestyle and it fits something that they want, whether it's in the building or the unit itself or the neighborhood. And so, our job is to really understand and make sure that they feel included.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a renter who probably could, has options, right?
Yeah.
Like they're older, they're successful, they have, so they really do have to want to be in the place. And yeah, the dog thing I think is a important, point here. It's amazing. You can't go to a restaurant nowadays without having a dog menu on it, which I mean, I thought it was hilarious when I first saw it, and now it's just everywhere. So it's just commonplace, like it really has become for a lot of people like a substitute for children. So
and people will stay, they will, upon renewal, they will stay because they have found friends in the building who are also pet owners. They've again built their sort of neighborhood within a neighborhood or their community, and they will choose to renew. Yeah,
their dogs have friends, right? Like I think that could be enough to keep people to stay. Well, this has been great. I mean, we burned through this hour really quick. Hopefully everybody got a lot from it. I thought it was, really fascinating hearing from all of you. There's certainly a lot going on in the multifamily market, and I wish all of you well. I know that, things have been a little bit tough compared to the last 10 years, the, prices of things going up and the market going down, but I still see a lot of really good green space for thoughtful operators, like I'm sure all of you listening to this are. So I just want to say thank you all so much for joining. Ariana, Amer, David, thanks so much for joining, and have a great rest of the day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
so
everyone.
much.
Bye now.
Bye.